Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Sophia, your host. After witnessing the Rwandan genocide, the world said never again. 2 decades later, deadly violence persists in places like Syria, the Central African Republic, and South Sudan. In 1948, in the aftermath of the Holocaust, the United Nations pledged to prevent genocide. And yet we continue to ignore instances of genocide. What is genocide? Why does it occur? And what can the international community do to prevent or suppress it? Joining me to discuss genocide, Ziyaad Mia. He's a Toronto lawyer and adjunct professor at Osgoode Hall Law School. Here is the interview now. Ziyaad Mia, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Assalamu alaikum, Sophia.
Now, it seems like we have a lot of trouble figuring out when a genocide is actually occurring. Would you say that, for example, what's happening in the Central African Republic is a genocide? How do we define what a genocide is?
You know, lawyers, when they start parsing words, it's hard to, they can fight about words. But in general, I mean, you look at something, you know that saying, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I think most of us, lawyers and non-lawyers, would have a gut reaction to what a genocide is. I mean, we can look at the law, the Genocide Convention, and it says, you know, systematically trying to wipe out a group of people, whether it's based on their race, ethnicity, religion, nationality. Genocide is genos, a group being killed, side, killing, you know, from the Greek word. So trying to wipe out an entire group, an attempt to do that, efforts to do that. I would say what's happening in Central African Republic is clearly going down that road.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be executed.
How can you tell that it's going down that road?
Because a group of people, Muslims, are being targeted because of their faith, arguably, on the face of it, and people are trying to kill them, wipe them out, or drive them out of the country. That would basically hit the threshold criteria. And it's an organized fashion that's happening in. General Romeo Dallaire, who's a senator now in Canada, who was in Rwanda during the genocide there, has warned that we are potentially in genocide territory in Central African Republic, and he's raising the alarm, saying we need to do something.
So how has the international community responded? It doesn't seem like they've called it a genocide yet.
This is the problem, because what intersects, I mean, we can look at law, the Genocide Convention, crimes against humanity is illegal, war crimes are illegal. They're all great on paper, but unfortunately when you get governments, many governments have different interests. Governments are obviously perpetrating some of these crimes, and people line up on different sides. You can just see in Ukraine, although that's not, you know, I don't think it's genocide, but people are lining up and preventing action or trying to stop things from being done.
So there are political interests then?
That's exactly right. So you see it in Syria is a classic example of that, is that we're just watching it happen. And basically the Americans are checkmated, and they may not even want to. They may want to be checkmated. And the Russians and Iranians are preventing intervention.
So is it realistic then to imagine that genocides can be prevented?
You know, I don't want to be too cynical, but I think at the end of the day, what I like to think about is individual responsibility, you as a human being first, because genocide doesn't happen out of the blue. It happens when individuals start to form groups, and their governments or militias or paramilitaries or someone or their priest or imam or some leader tells them to do something, and then they start to kill others. So what we need to do is start from the grassroots up, so that you need people to commit genocide. If those people refuse to do that and refuse to be brainwashed, then it's less likely for governments to actually carry out these things. And yes, we need leaders. Like Canada has been a leader in the past in this area and in peacekeeping generally. But Canada's sort of lost that way. I mean, the International Criminal Court, which came out of the crimes in Rwanda and Bosnia in the 1990s, again, in modern times, massive atrocities were committed, and the world stood by. The International Criminal Court...
What do you think intervention would entail, though? Would it entail military intervention or sanctions?
It could be a number of things. Yes, military intervention obviously would be on one end of the spectrum, where you'd go in, drop in some troops, and stop what's happening immediately. But you could, if you see the beginnings of genocide, you could sanction a country. You could clearly stop weapons. Because what happened in Rwanda is the French, even the sons of political leaders, were found to be selling arms to those committing genocide. So you need to stop the flow of weapons to those who are committing genocide. And when we talk about Rwanda, we can explore what happened there. That preparations, genocide happens with a lot of work. I mean, if you want to commit genocide, you really have to be pretty organized.
And it seems like you have to mobilize the entire population to also, not only support the genocide, but participate in it.
That's right. In some cases, Rwanda, for example, you had literally hundreds of thousands of people participating by killing their neighbors.
Yes.
So you and I are friends today, and tomorrow we'd be killing each other. So that's, it's the conundrum. How did we get there? In other cases, so in Nazi Germany, it was, Germans being Germans, very systematic. They had death camps. They didn't kill Jews at their homes in most cases. They dehumanized them, registered them, collected them up, moved them to death camps, and systematically killed 6 million people, and then others as well. Now, individual Germans, whether they knew or not, some may say they didn't know, some may be willfully blind, some did know, but the population must have known something was up. Jews started being gone from your cities, your neighbors are missing. I'd start to scratch my head and ask a question, where's Sophia gone to? So that, it can take many forms, but yes, a government or a group that wants to commit this needs to be organized, needs to have a plan, needs to arm itself, and then needs to mobilize to do it. So you can cut off those sources in many ways.
Now, the world has said never again after the Holocaust, but we continue to see genocides occurring, in different parts of the world. Why is that? And is there anything that we can do to stop that?
You're asking the wrong guy for why is that. I mean, it's human nature, I guess. This has happened.
Are we inherently evil? What's going on there?
Well, these are questions for philosophers and religious leaders, I guess. Human beings have been doing this for a long time. They want to perpetuate their interests, and when they lose their moral bearing or compass or anchor and learn to kill someone else, that's the problem for their own interests. I mean, Islam, and every faith, but Islam says, if you take a life unjustly, it's as if you've killed the whole world. And if you save a life, it's as if you've saved the whole world. So there is a fundamental prohibition on killing.
So do you think religion can contribute to preventing things like genocide?
I think it can if people of faith actually learn about their faith, take it into themselves and practice it. So let's take Islam, for example. If we took those values in and also understood that in Islam, there are laws of war that prohibit all these things that we're talking about that in modern times are in international law, are all clearly prohibited in Islam. I would even say that use of weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, are clearly prohibited in Islam because Islam does not allow you to kill non-combatants. The elderly, you can't destroy crops, wealth. How do you do that? By using weapons of mass destruction. And how do you commit genocide when you're not allowed to kill non-combatants and civilians? And any of those who actually stop fighting, even combatants who stop fighting, are not allowed to be killed. So those are the bounds of Islam's laws of war, which are very similar to modern laws of war. But again, you see Muslims committing crazy things in the world, and Christians and every kind of person. So how do you get people to come back to the principles, take them in themselves, and let those principles govern them?
Well, that's a question that I would ask you.
Yeah, you asked me in '64 that. If I had that answer, I'd be running the world, and solving these problems. But I think that is the key. And again, come back to each individual. I know it's a tougher job to work on people as individuals, but once you train a person not to drink the Kool-Aid of hate, that you need to hate a Jew or a Muslim or a black person or a woman, or this person is evil, because genocide usually begins with making someone the other, then dehumanizing them through hate. You see it in every instance, like a pattern.
Can you give me an example of a genocide where that actually occurred?
The Jews were made to be lesser than human, right, by the Germans, and they were just exterminated, or there was an attempt to exterminate all of them. In Rwanda, what you saw is people were calling the Tutsi, the group that was subject to the genocide, cockroaches and snakes.
And I believe the media was playing a role in whipping up that feeling of hatred.
Yes. The genocideers in Rwanda had control of radio stations. And radio was a popular means of communication. And they used that to spread the message of dehumanization and of mobilization to send messages out. In today's world, we have many more communications tools than radio. As you know, social media, the internet. So you can imagine how that could be amped up using those tools as well. So part of it is, if there is a genocide ongoing, is to nip those things in the bud, destabilize them, take them offline, jam radio broadcasts, or today take those accounts offline through hacking. The other thing is, use those tools to counteract this, right? To spread different messages of commonality. I mean, Islam tells us, above all else, all creatures, including human beings, are Allah's family. The Quran is clear about the commonality of humans, and there's a hadith, famous hadith that says, all creation are my family, and those who are kind to my family are kind to me, essentially. I may paraphrase, but that's the message. So that's the message that needs to go out to counteract this message of division, because genocide, hate, all of that, war, comes from creating division between people.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for your time, Ziyaad Mia.
Thanks, Sophia.
Next week, we will be speaking with Ziyaad about the Rwandan genocide in commemoration of the 20th anniversary.